Hi, everyone. Matt Damon here. One of the perks of being an actor is that for a few weeks or months at a time, I get to walk in someone else's shoes. And sometimes I have a lot in common with the character I'm playing, like Jason Bourne, for example. I mean, those movies are basically autobiographical, clearly. But more often than not, the day to day realities of the narrative world I'm stepping into are completely foreign to me. Except, here's the thing, the dystopian future we've seen on screen so many times over the years, where people need to travel through space and time to find habitable planets or shrink themselves down to 5 inches tall to combat overpopulation, is starting to seem less and less like a figment of Hollywood's imagination. Drought, food scarcity, extreme weather, that's not just the stuff of science fiction anymore. It's our current reality. And unless we act now, it's only going to get much, much worse. Around 15 years ago, I got some great advice from President Bill Clinton. He said, turn toward the problems you see. And that idea is important now more than ever. The problems we face today are many, and it's a whole heck of a lot easier to put your head in the sand and go about living your life than actually confront them. I mean, come on, just look around. We're in the middle of a global pandemic with almost 1 million dead. The world's economic health is on life support. We have a refugee crisis that's only getting worse, extreme poverty. The list goes on. And in the United States, we're reckoning with centuries of racial injustice and rampant inequality, while a deep partisan divide threatens our ability to find any meaningful solutions. And hanging over it all, both in terms of the scale of the problem and the potential it holds in solving many of society's biggest problems, is climate change, which is an existential threat to the planet and humanity, and why we're gathered here today. Now, the good news is I've seen firsthand that it is possible to make progress when you turn toward the problem, even when it seems impossible. Here's an example. More than 2 billion people don't have access to safe drinkable water, and as a result, over 1 million people die per year. But the problem is actually much bigger than that because it's also robbing millions of women and children of their future potential, their true potential. After all, if you have to walk multiple hours each way to collect water for your family, how are you going to school? How are you preparing yourself for a better future? And with climate change, water sources are drying up and those walks are getting longer and sometimes simply futile. Now, I've been on those walks with kids who should have been in school. And through the organizations I co-founded, Water.org and Water Equity, we've empowered more than 30 million people with safe water or sanitation. And that progress could be wiped out if we don't get serious about climate change. The scale of the climate crisis is just staggering, but you can't let that be an excuse for doing nothing. So to fight climate change, we can't be overwhelmed by the seeming impossibility of the task at hand. We don't have the luxury of ignoring it if we want to build a better future for our children and grandchildren. And the potential impact of making even incremental progress cannot be understated. Every decision we make now, every action we take, and every commitment we make has an impact on the world that the next generations are going to inherit. And it is incumbent upon all of us to ensure that it's as good of a world as the one we enjoyed. The key to solving any of the problems we face, but especially climate change, is working together to find and implement solutions that can make a difference, both in the near and long term. And I have the privilege today of introducing someone who understands that deeply. As mayor of New York City, Mike Bloomberg was someone who didn't care a whole lot about partisan politics or what people thought about him, as long as the decisions he was making were for the greater good. Just ask anyone who was a smoker in 2003. Trust me, I was there. And that's been the case since he left office, too. His number one concern has always been about finding meaningful solutions for improving people's lives, especially when it comes to his work in public health and fighting climate change. And that has never been clearer than when, after President Trump announced that he was withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement, Mike worked with Governor Jerry Brown to rally businesses, states, cities, and local leaders to still uphold our end of the deal. And because of that, the United States is continuing to make much needed progress reducing emissions despite the actions of the White House. In short, Mike is someone who turns toward the problem and finds the solution. And with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Mike Bloomberg.
Thank you, Matt, for that kind introduction. It's great to share the virtual stage with a fellow Boston native, and it's an honor to be introduced by the one and only Jason Bourne. Although I have to say, not even Bourne helped provide safe, healthy, and drinkable water to 30 million people. And that's exactly what you've done through your work with water.org. So thank you for all you're doing to make the world a better place. I'm glad to welcome you to the first Bloomberg Green Festival. Though I wish we were hosting you in person in New York City instead of virtually, this has been a very difficult time for everyone around the world. A historic pandemic has uprooted our way of life and killed hundreds of thousands, and has destroyed economies, turning an unprecedented public health crisis into an economic one as well. It's also a time for significant social upheaval, with people taking to the streets to fight for important causes. But with crisis comes opportunity. And we have a once-in-a-generation chance to make the planet fairer, safer, and more resilient for our children and grandchildren. And it starts by crafting economic and social recoveries that do three things. One, improve public health. Two, strengthen economies and make them more equitable. And three, tackle the most urgent long-term crisis we face, climate change. All of those challenges are connected, and their solutions are too. We need to accelerate the transition to a 100% clean energy economy. Now, in an ideal world, national governments would be leading the charge in this fight. But as we've seen here in the U.S. these past few years, some leaders have their heads in the sand when it comes to climate change. They're not just ignoring all the signs telling us that we need to find solutions to climate change before it's too late. They're actually pulling us backwards. But we can't afford to wait for those leaders to wake up and face facts. We need to push forward now. And I know we can because we already have and have been for years. Here are a few examples of what we're doing to create change from the bottom up at Bloomberg. Our foundation, Bloomberg Philanthropies, in partnership with C40 and the Global Covenant of Mayors, has worked with cities all around the world to take action on climate change. Cities account for the majority of the world's population and the majority of carbon emissions. So what mayors do at the city level has the power to stop climate change in its tracks, and we're glad to support them. We're also helping to lead a campaign called Beyond Coal, which is working to close all of America's coal-fired power plants within the next 10 years and replace them with clean energy. It's been so successful that coal-powered plants are closing at roughly the same rate under President Trump as they were under President Obama. And we're helping expand these efforts to Europe, Australia, and most recently, South Korea. But we also know that we can make a much bigger impact when we work together. That's why when President Trump announced he would pull the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement, I teamed up with then Governor of California, Jerry Brown, to rally the American people around taking action on climate change. We call this America's Pledge, a collective effort led by U.S. cities, states, businesses, and local groups who are committed to fulfilling America's Paris commitments. And because of our action, we're making a lot of progress. Each of the past 4 years, we've released a report tracking that progress and charting out what we need to do going forward. And I'm glad to say that today we're releasing our latest report, titled Delivering on America's Pledge. This year's analysis finds that despite the global impacts of this pandemic and 4 years of environmental rollbacks and climate denialism from the Trump administration, cities, states, and businesses are transitioning to clean energy faster than ever before. And the news is even more promising looking forward. It tells us that if the U.S. federal government aggressively re-engages in the climate fight by 2021 and partners with ambitious and expanded state and local leadership, we'll be able to cut emissions in half by 2030, which will put the United States right back on track to meet and even surpass our original Paris Agreement goals. That's fantastic news, and it tells us two things. One, the more we galvanize cities, states, and businesses to act on climate change, the more progress we can make. And two, in terms of the fight against climate change, this upcoming election in the U.S. is more important than any before. I know firsthand that it is possible to save people's lives, grow local economies, and fight the climate crisis all at once. And to meet this moment and come out of it stronger, that's exactly what we need to do. Now, with that, it is my pleasure to officially present our new America's Pledge Report to the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Patricia Espinosa. Madam Secretary, as they say, the virtual floor is yours. Would you please say a few words?
Thank you for your remarks, Mayor Bloomberg. At the outset, I want to make something clear. UN Climate Change is a completely non-political organization with a policy of what we call inclusive multilateralism. We have always worked with cities, communities, investors, private businesses, civil society, and more to help address the climate change emergency. One example is our recently announced Race to Zero campaign, which includes many of the same groups I just mentioned, to build a zero carbon recovery from COVID-19, one that creates jobs and unlocks inclusive, sustainable growth. Inclusive multilateralism is about bringing more voices to the table, resulting in more ideas, more solutions, and more climate action. That's exactly what we need right now, and especially as we look towards COP26. In this vein, I congratulate your organization for completion of the America's Pledge annual report, detailing the wide range of climate-related actions by US cities, states, businesses, and universities. It is the third America's Pledge since 2017. That year, in Bonn, I told you we faced an incredible sense of urgency, that we needed subnational organizations, private industry, and civil society to do their part, lead by example, and drive more climate action. The pledge outlines how so many responded to that call, and it reflects the work happening at the subnational level. Yet the urgency for others to follow this lead has only grown. In 3 years, so much has changed in the world, including the arrival of COVID-19, which has altered lives, economies, and the nature of business everywhere. The climate change crisis, however, did not disappear with the pandemic. It's like a hurricane slowly heading towards us, one we've been warned about for decades. For many, it has already reached their shores. The convergence of these two global crises has opened a window of opportunity not simply to recover from a virus, but to build forward, to build cities and communities that are safe, healthy, green, and sustainable. We need a coordinated global recovery from COVID-19 that follows the blueprints the world has already established, the Paris Agreement and the UN's 2030 Agenda. We must minimize the creation of carbon-intensive infrastructure. This will determine the emissions pathway of the next decades. Preventing the spread of infection has been the most effective approach to the pandemic. Preventing future emissions is the most effective approach to addressing climate change. We also need the public and private sectors to embrace renewable energy and make the deep transformational changes needed to change the dangerous climate trajectory we're on. This must be a global collaborative effort. Multilateralism and collaboration have always and will always lead to success. Let us embrace the power and strength of inclusive multilateralism to recover from COVID-19, make progress on the climate change agenda, and build a more sustainable future. Thank you.
With the fires burning and the smoke covering literally the whole state, we're in a very unprecedented situation. 3 million acres of burn. Never in the history of California, at least where we have records, have that much fire ever burned, and this early in the year. We have 2 months to go before the fire season is completed. This is a real challenge. It's a human tragedy, People are dying. Animals are killed. Homes are being destroyed. The habitat is being destroyed as well. This is a major, fundamental, existential threat. It's time we have to do something about it. America's pledge, well, we are doing something. And that is a major milestone in responding to the Paris Accords. We have a lot to do, and we're doing much. And the report shows how much states and businesses and localities have been able to accomplish. And that's good, but not enough. And California being in the lead still is not enough. So the rest of the states, we have so much to go. America's pledge has given us that boost. We have momentum, and we have to keep going. We have to mobilize the American people through local authority, through powerful business leaders. We can get it done. And as we work to accomplish this goal of reducing carbon emissions, we have to also tell our president and tell our Congress that you have to get back on the field and be with us, shoulder to shoulder, fighting to reduce carbon emissions. This is the threat that all humanity has to deal with. But here in California and here in America, we have to show the example. The America's Pledge has shown the way, and it will continue to show the way in the months and years ahead. But we have to add to that a national administration that works with us, so we truly pledge all the resources of the United States. And then and only then, when America is fully committed, can we expect the Chinese, the Indians, the Africans, and other people on planet Earth to do their part. And unless everyone does their part, it won't get done. It takes states, local elected leaders to do what they can. And then all of us, as part of American Pledge, putting the pressure on the federal government, lobbying our Congress, our senators, and helping to elect a president who believes the science of climate change, who knows what kind of danger and suffering we're already in, and the climate is not even close to what it's going to become. The deterioration which scientists predict is just around the corner. Well, it's already here, but around the corner is even worse. Extreme weather events, fire, flooding, infectious diseases, intensified tornadoes and hurricanes. It's there, it's coming, and America's Pledge is about responding. So don't hesitate, don't slow down, but join together, all of us, members of Americans Pledge. Let's get it done.
Hi, I'm Governor Gina Raimondo, and I'm grateful to be here today with so many incredible leaders. First, I want to thank everybody who worked on this report. And I also have to thank my good friend Mayor Bloomberg and Governor Brown for their leadership on America's Pledge. President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement was horrible and reckless. But your work is keeping our nation on the international stage in the fight against climate change. States like mine are leading the way in this fight because we know that climate change is the biggest threat facing our nation today. We're seeing that right now in the western states as they battle devastating wildfires. Here in Rhode Island, we recognize the damaging impact climate change has had and will have on our communities, especially those on our coast. Rhode Islanders have demanded that we take bold action, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Earlier this year, I set an ambitious goal for Rhode Island to become the first state in America to be powered 100% by renewable energy by 2030. We've created thousands of green jobs, we're transforming our heating systems, and we've worked to make our state buildings more efficient. For all these reasons, Rhode Island's been nationally recognized for our efforts. We consistently rank at the top of states in the country for energy efficiency. We're home to the nation's first and only offshore wind farm. And we've committed to several nationwide initiatives like TCI and the goals of the Climate Alliance. But we're just getting started. There is so much more to do. This pandemic has created a lot of challenges, and it's constantly at the top of everyone's mind. But I'm confident that we can also, at the same time, maintain our fight against climate change. We have to. So here in Rhode Island, that's what we're going to do. We're the ocean state. We have a lot at stake. And so we're going to do everything we can to push forward, to lead, to innovate, and accomplish more in our fight against climate change. Thank you all for your leadership and thank you for being here today.
Hi, I'm Lyles, and I'm the proud mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg and Governor Brown for leading the America's Pledge initiative, which has allowed my fellow mayors, governors, and business leaders to be a part of a climate change movement in the United States. Let me tell you a little bit about Charlotte. Every day, Charlotte welcomes more than 100 new residents, and this city is expected to add almost 400,000 people over the next 20 years. The Charlotte region is home to more than 2.5 million people and is one of the top 5 fastest growing large cities. One reason people are moving here is our geographic location. With all this growth comes challenges. Our increasing population density will further strain infrastructure already threatened by higher temperatures and increased precipitation intensity. This growth will also lead to increases in respiratory and heat-related illnesses associated with emissions from power plants and vehicles and increasing temperatures. And we know that the people who are most affected are already our most vulnerable. Climate change is an equity issue. These changes also put our critical regional resources increasingly at risk. Ultimately, this will have dramatic effects on the vibrancy and the viability of our metropolitan area that so many are proud to call home. So we've made a choice to take immediate action now. Charlotte has embraced the reality that long-term plans are needed to change the way we consume energy. As a signatory to the Global Covenant of Mayors, Charlotte has joined thousands of cities and regions in a commitment to accelerate ambitious, measurable climate and energy initiatives that lead to an inclusive, equitable, low-emission, and climate-resilient future. As a city, we are doing our part, investing in solar energy, transitioning our fleet, including our buses, to electric, creating workforce development opportunities focused on careers in clean energy, building walkable, bikeable cities with accessible public transit, setting goals to become zero carbon in our energy and buildings by 2030 and a low carbon city by 2050. We know we cannot wait for someone to solve these problems for us. That's why mayors across the county have stepped up to lead on addressing climate change and building a healthier future for our residents. Together, we can meet this challenge.
Auk Yohach, Ansjak Hiwishka. Good day. My name is Fawn Sharp. I serve as president of the Quinault Indian Nation and president of the National Congress of American Indians, an organization representing 574 tribal nations across this country. We are so happy and honored to continue to join America's pledge to ensure that the next 7 generations are gifted a clean, healthy, and sustainable future and natural world. We have long recognized that no one is immune from climate change and everyone has a responsibility. And we have been so happy to witness leaders emerge around the world. Leaders beginning with our students, scientists, cities, counties, states, colleges, universities, faith-based communities, every sector that one could imagine, we are witnessing leaders emerge and people who are now starting to understand and recognize the impacts of climate change are but mere symptoms of a much deeper imbalance. And that imbalance didn't begin just last year, 10 years ago, or even a lifetime ago. That imbalance began centuries ago. And tribal nations have known, we've long known that this day of reckoning is coming. And this day of reckoning is one in which we all have to choose. Are we going to continue to be caught up in the politic of the day, Or are we going to make the right decision for environmental justice, economic justice? Because that's what it's going to take. And we know that those that have joined us in America's pledge have exceeded all expectations. We set out with a very clear goal to ensure that we hit the right targets by 2030. And we have accomplished that goal and we continue that trajectory. So on this day, we are very honored to continue our pledge, America's pledge, and we stand strong with the We Are Still In movement because it is all of us. We are still in. We are here and we're going to continue to rise above the burning political and environmental landscape to do the right thing. Siakwil.
Hi, I'm Mayor Melvin Carter from St. Paul, Minnesota. Now more than ever, even amid this enduring pandemic and economic crisis, local communities across our nation are stepping up in unprecedented ways to respond to the ongoing challenges of our climate crisis. COVID-19 has laid bare the very challenges we've fought so hard to overcome for more than a generation, and that's why it's critical that we build back better, even stronger, and more resilient communities. We're fortunate that mayors, governors, and other leaders across our nation are united in this vital work. From switching to clean energy and more efficient buildings, to decarbonizing our transportation systems. In St. Paul and in communities across our nation, we are leading the way through this climate crisis. While we've made important progress, we need partnership at all levels of our government and in communities across our entire nation to ensure that we can meet the enormous challenges we face today. Let's continue this vital climate action work together and keep America's pledge to supporting a sustainable and resilient future for our children and grandchildren. Thank you for your commitment to this important work. Stay safe, keep your masks on, and we'll see you soon.
Greetings from Los Angeles. I'm Mayor Eric Garcetti, and I'm proud to help launch this year's America's Pledge Report alongside my dear friends, Mayor Michael Bloomberg and Governor Jerry Brown. None of us need to be reminded of the stakes of our work to fight climate change. But if we did, we'd simply have to look around and see the vast fires and smoke-filled air here in California, or the intensifying hurricanes on the Gulf Coast, the rising temperatures and heat waves across our country, and record rain in other parts. All of it reinforces the urgency and the magnitude of this climate emergency, reaffirming our unwavering belief that confronting the climate crisis and solving it will take all of us, the public and private sectors, here locally as well as globally. Because yes, of course we need federal action, and yes, we need national leadership ready to trust science and tackle the monumental threat to our health and our economy. But if this report tells us anything, it's that we aren't waiting for Washington to step up to the plate, nor do we have to. Cities, businesses, students, and residents are driving the agenda for change, and groups like Climate Mayors, which I'm so proud to chair, are taking the reins. This bipartisan coalition from red states and blue, representing 74 million Americans who came together after President Trump indicated he'd pull out of the Paris Agreement, we said, well, if you're out, we're in. We're investing in clean energy and green jobs, powering our grids with renewables, and reimagining a future of sustainability and equity no matter what anyone else does. Because even as the COVID-19 pandemic has drawn so much of our time and attention, mayors remain focused on the need for the pandemic of climate change. We know in this report, and as our pledge continues to reiterate, our part to save our planet and to do our job. And we're going to keep at this every single day. This must be the climate decade, a decade of action in which we save this earth, but we also save our communities. Let's go get it done.
In 2017, when President Trump announced his intention to pull out of the Paris Agreement, an overwhelming chorus of Americans said, "We're still in."
An all-electric bus fleet by 2025.
To a Los Angeles that has 100% renewable energy.
Increasing the number of residents in the city of Gary who recycle.
Taking our energy generation portfolio to 65 to 75% renewable by the year 2027.
California Governor Jerry Brown and I quickly launched America's Pledge,
The key word is perseverance.
an initiative that measures the efforts of more than 4,000 cities, states, businesses, and other local groups that are committed to driving down emissions.
America's Pledge on climate is so important. It's about more than living up to our responsibilities on the world stage. It's about keeping our word on the world stage.
We have to lead the charge.
We have a better future if we all work together.
We can create a 360 solution for the entire planet.
It's we the people. Working together, we'll get there.
And despite the Trump administration's best efforts to drag us backwards, local leaders are actually accelerating their progress, protecting the climate over the last 4 years.
The state of Maryland is committing to continue to fight climate change.
I am committed to demonstrating that environmental protection and economic prosperity are not mutually exclusive.
To have climate awareness integrated into every aspect of our businesses.
To making climate change a public health issue.
But we're not done yet. This fall, we have the chance to elect a climate leader to the White House who will rejoin the Paris Agreement and honor our commitment to it, and reestablish America as a global leader in the fight against climate change. So let's do it.